Good evening. This is semester in Detroit. This is creating community institutions. Are we all in the right place? In the right place and space? Very good, very good. Very excited, very happy to have everyone here in the newest installment of the Semester in Detroit series. This series, this day, this session today is focusing on creating community institutions. And we are looking at this whole semester on the question of reinvigorating the commons. We started off talking about some of the challenges, some of the crises, some of the issues. Now we're moving to four skillful and masterful people that will talk about some of the institutions that are being created in responses to the current situations. And where we're going, the final 2 weeks of this semester, which are November 28th and December 5th, we're very excited about because they're going to be what we call a People's Movement Assembly, which is going to be a chance to really put forth all of the things that you're thinking about, to synthesize all of the things that you're learning, and really decide as individuals, as groups, how you want to move forward. We hope that the speakers, from this week and from past weeks will join us on one or two of those other weeks also, and we'll really talk about, synthesize what do we want to do in Detroit to reinvestigate, to reinvigorate, and to save the commons. My name is Will Copeland. I'll be the moderator for this evening, and I'm very excited to welcome you all here and to introduce our four great distinguished panelists. I'm so excited to hear what they have to share with us all today. I'm going to read a brief bio, and then afterwards it'll be time for each of the panelists to introduce themselves a little bit further and introduce their work as well. To my immediate left, we have Bryce Detroit. He is an evolutionary MC, pioneer of entertainment justice, and as a culture creator, national award-winning music producer, founder of Detroit Recording Company, and a founding member of the 1 Mile Project in Detroit. We have Marisol Teachworth. She taught for 6 years in the Bronx, New York, Hollywood, Florida, and Detroit. Was a middle school teacher for 7 years. Has a master's of educational leadership and administration. As an artist and engaged community member, has led many youth groups and created many projects, and is co-founder of the James and Grace Lee Ball School. We have Kim Shirobi. She's a community practitioner and student of life, a retired physical education teacher. She's a learner and a teacher, and actually she believes that everyone is a learner and a teacher. Former community liaison and facility manager for EMEAC, East Michigan Environmental Action Council, member of several organizations, Burwood House Incorporated, Women Creating Caring Communities, James and Grace Lee Ball Center, Burwood Block Club Association, Healing Support Network, and much, much more. And lastly, we have B. Anthony Holly, a community organizer, artist, entrepreneur, founder of Conscious Community Cooperative think tank, a grassroots self-sufficiency organization, supporting and also co-director of the Cooperation Group. B. Anthony, along with other local leaders, launched the Detroit Community Wealth Fund to provide access to capital for local community-owned businesses through non-extractive lending. So the topic of today is creating community institutions, creating commons institutions. We'd just like a little bit for each of you to just introduce yourself a little bit more, introduce your perspective, and introduce your work a little bit.
Peace. Okay. Activate the timer, 4 minutes. So, I am Bryce Detroit. As it relates to the conversation of building institutions, My life's work is building a cultural institution in the form of a new music economy in Detroit. Now, when we say new music economy, in particular, I'm speaking to a music economy, a music ecosystem that is built off of the legacy of the black and brown music industry in Detroit that for 40 or 50 years was producing wealth for black and brown people that rivaled the auto industry. It was not just cars that helped create the black middle class in Detroit. It was literally a recording industry, hyper-locally rooted, globally distributed. When we speak to cultural institutions, the reason for this is, what is culture, first of all? From a my diasporic African perspective, culture equals the identity, self-identity plus collective identity, and the subsequent behavior sets that result from that identity. We need institutions that are designed for the cultivation of self-identities from ancestral and indigenous perspectives outside of consumer identities. We need buildings that we can activate with programming to do so. We need facilities and the technical know-how to be able to produce media for this purpose. All of this takes people, it takes places, and the energy of the activity that's generated produces the economy. So that's cultural institution, and that's why we need one, because we need diasporic African and indigenous people. We need to be cultivating identities that see us outside of this very low slave labor economic identity, which has been forced on people for a long time in this country. But we need to be projecting from points of identity that will actualize self-determination, that will actualize change in our built environment. And that's some real shit. To affect building of these cultural economies, in particular music, since as a record producer, that's my thing, have been doing work, economic justice work, via a couple of different organizations. One organization is Center for Community-Based Enterprise. Our organization is dedicated to, on one core level, creating new wealth in Detroit for diasporic African and indigenous people through community-based enterprise and collective entrepreneurship. Also am doing some of this work through an organization that Anthony will probably talk a little bit more about, Detroit Community Wealth Fund. And that is an initiative that comes out of organizing work originally done by East Michigan Environmental Action Council. So we can talk a little bit more about how an environmental justice organization is supporting economic justice and economic institution building in Detroit.
Bryce. Hi everyone, hold on. Thanks for being here. My name is Marisol Teachworth, and I'm the programming director and one of the co-founders of the James and Grace Lee Boggs School. It's a small community-based K-8 on Detroit's east side. We opened in 2013, we're in year 5, and I've always been interested in education. I think back to my childhood and I would like line my stuffed animals and my dolls up and ask them to do math problems, and I would read to them. I was doing my undergrad work in the late 90s at Wayne State University and wanted to be involved with like youth movement building and wanted to hang out with other young people who were active in the city of Detroit, planting gardens, painting murals, and this is where I stumbled across an organization called Detroit Summer in 1998. A friend of mine said, "Oh, you should come to the Commons with me and meet Grace." And I'm like, "Who's Grace?" And I went to the Commons, and I see this old Chinese lady sitting in this chair, sort of reading and typing away. It's like, "Hey, my name is Marisol," and she looks at me and shakes my hand and says, "The most important thing you can do is grow your own food." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, hi." And I'm learning now, like 20 years later, like what that means, the significance of that. I went on to work and volunteer with Detroit Summer that summer. Finished my undergrad degree, taught for 7 years, and was miserable. This can't be the way school happens. This is abusive. I work in a stress factory. I hate my job. I went into the wrong profession. I needed to be doing something different. I felt like I needed a major career change, and I started thinking about when I felt best about life and when I felt most productive and most effective. And it reminded me, it brought me back to my memories of Grace, brought me back to working with Detroit Summer. And I called a friend of mine ill, and at the time I was teaching in Miami. "Please tell me that there's something going on with Detroit Summer. Please tell me that there's a youth movement. Please tell me that Grace, is writing and doing things." And they said it's true. It happened to be the summer of the U.S. Social Forum in 2010, and they were like, "Come home." And actually, there's a small group of people who are thinking about starting a school based on James and Grace philosophies. I'd love to introduce you to them. And so it's all it took for me to quit my job and move back to Detroit. And I started working as a school developer, and we worked for 4 years until we're finally authorized a charter through Eastern Michigan University. And we opened in 2013 with 34 kids. And that was K through 4. Now we're a K through 8. We've got over 130 kids, I think 136 kids. And it's been quite a journey for me. I feel like we are doing the opposite of my experience in other public schools. Our mission is to nurture creative, critical thinkers who contribute to the well-being of their communities. And in building this institution and building this school, we're thinking about, what do people need? Like, as students, as kids grow into adults, what kind of relationships do they have? What can they do? Where have they been? And how does school contribute to really helping people grow into becoming fully human? And so, in addition to all of the things that have to happen in school, there's this philosophical thread or these philosophical conversations that were planted by James and Grace and their teachings, and we continue to have these conversations with our students, with our families, and we'll continue to have them. So, hello everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm Kim Chirobi, and when I think about my work, wow. So I think about my work as a person who really enjoys helping other people develop, as I like to develop myself. As a connector, and a lot of my practicing is happening in the place that I grew up at, which is on Berwick Street. And I've come full circle. I remember coming home from college and saying to my mother and her peers who lived on the block, and I eventually moved there to purchase a home. Let's work together and build this neighborhood. And they told me, we don't want to do that. We're retired. We just want to go be laid back, and we're not interested. So I got really disappointed, and I started volunteering all over the city. Then there was a lot of nonprofits and
have found my way back to my neighborhood. Really, again, never having left that neighborhood. Because when you leave and go away to school, it doesn't count, right? So you're still there. So anyway, the long story short, I'm in my neighborhood for over 55 years, at least. And just really trying to figure out how to reconnect and grow as people, which is not an easy thing to do, especially sometimes when it's uncomfortable, and your values doesn't always mesh with the people you live with. So actually really living and practicing and being the type of person that I say that I am, and challenging other people to do the same. And as far as institutions are concerned, I think we're the institution. So the institution is inside of you, because an institution is nothing but a building, but it's the people that makes the decisions that creates the institutions. I think a lot of times people forget that it's the people who are the institutions. And until we change and do things differently, we'll continue to have the same results. So that's what I want to leave you with, that we're the institutions.
I love these snaps. My name is B. Anthony Holly. Peace, everybody. How y'all feeling? Love energy in that. How y'all feeling? Can we just take a collective breath together on the count of 3? Is that all right? Yes. All right. 1, 2, 3. I should. Like I said, I am B. Anthony Holly. I have to, hopefully he's counting me over there because I do need it. On the clock, I'm a community organizer, activist. I think I really wanted to start by, we've been doing this work as a collective, a small group of people that are working on themselves, and I actually created a personal mission statement, and I've just been practicing saying it out loud. So my purpose is achieving self-sufficiency through creative self-expression and the development of resiliency programs in my community that spread to unite the African diaspora. And so I'm consistently saying that over and over to ground myself in why I do what I do. And it's been an evolution of getting to that point of clarity and seeing how all the work that I do is connected. So coming back from school, I'm glad you said what you said about you never really leave, because I came back. But when I was in school, it was a big thing to come back to Detroit, because when I left, most of the advice I got even from family members, like, you'd be a fool to come back to Detroit. You'd go somewhere else, and I couldn't see myself being successful anywhere else before I was successful in Detroit. If you're successful in Detroit, it's cake anywhere else. But Detroit is where my heart is. I came back and began being involved in activism, really looking for kind of disheartened, feeling like that people didn't get what I knew. Like I knew a lot. People didn't get it. And then I came and summer 2012, graduated, saw an article about Detroit summer, and lo and behold, got introduced to the Ball Center and this whole world of work that was already, at my feet, that I could get in and navigate and start meeting people, and I just became a professional networker and activist. And it was an amazing experience, and it allowed me to meet so many different people and create a lot of meaningful relationships and be involved in a lot of meaningful institutions. And as I got more involved in activism, I started seeing that there was a gap in the perspective of economics. Like the economic perspective was just kind of missing. And how do we fund this? How do we take care of ourselves? How do we do these things? And it's just kind of like, we got the political movement, we have the legislation, but as far as the economic, it's like, we'll next meeting, we'll figure that out later, And I started, really researching the history of Black and brown people in Detroit and looking up Black Bottom and just whole thriving communities that were business centers, cultural hubs. And it just reminded me of like my passion for connecting to different business owners and people that are doing work in the community. And I found myself as a bridge builder to connect these different businesses. And I realized that these businesses need support. So we ended up creating the cooperation group to do the business development. And through doing that business development, we said, okay, some of these businesses, don't even have the resources, they don't even have the finances to be able to establish themselves or to be able to get access to capital. So myself, Bryce, and a few other people created the Detroit Community Wealth Fund. And so these institutions, I guess what I really want to leave you with is like being very intentional. It took me a while to realize that I was doing so much, but I realized that it was all closed loop. We're co-creating a closed loop, an ecosystem, so that when we want to actually actualize an idea, we have means, whether it's the support in developing the proposal, whether it's the actual business plan creation, whether it's actual financing the business, et cetera, the resources that we need, we have access in creating those institutions intentionally to support one another and work together. And that's how I identify the solidarity that I'm practicing. So thank you.
We have a few more questions, and there's also some things that you get inspired that you want to add, based on other people's, then definitely go ahead and throw some more things in there. The second question, I'm going to flip it a little bit, but it's the same basic question. The second question is, why do we, the communities of Detroit, need our own institutions? Well, one of the things that I heard mentioned repeatedly was this notion of connecting with the history of Detroit. And so it's not what I would call a colonial observation, which is very much like, they need this, they don't have this, there's this thing, but to me, each of you is rooted in learning and active in what's already there, but at the same time, you're still meeting a need, and I think, so it's a connection. At the same time, you still see a need, even as you're connected, which is very different than only focusing on the need, and just saying, here in Detroit, there's nothing but need. And so I was wondering if you could talk about this balance, between connection, networking, but at the same time, and you kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit, B. Anthony, you're connected, but at the same time, you are observing a certain need, which seems to be propelling you, propelling you forward and propelling you in your activities.
The question though is why, can you repeat the question, please?
The question is, why in Detroit do we need our own institutions? But how does that relate to you being connected with other things that are already in existence?
Okay, so one thing for sure, on the need side, so the framework of institutions, yes, on an ancestral, indigenous level, we have institutions. Do we use the word institution? No, that's a word, we're using English. This is some European culture in the language, institution. Saying that to say this though, the core of it. The first institutions that in this society we were introduced to were the political institutions, the economic institutions, the educational institutions, the institutions that manifest the policies, that manifest the environments that our work is responding to. So, short story, there are these quote-unquote institutions that are already building society in a particular way that is, we can say, oppressive, we can say systematically destructive to certain ethnic populations. So because of that environment, and it's absolutely necessary. This is what the ancestors and a whole lot of activism over the last 60 years has taught me, is that it's necessary to create our own thing that does work versus thinking that this shit that works perfectly against us is broken and trying to fix that. So that's like a concrete need for institutions. Now, the way that that connects to, like my particular work connects to the institution building that's happening, because of my profession existing in the mass media communications realm. Where does mass media and communications exist? How is that situated in society right now? Primarily that industry is the propaganda, it is the influence, ideas, and suggest opinions industry for the political system and for the economic system via corporations. So for me, it's like we need an institution that supports propagating new ideas about the activism, the new identities that will influence and inform people how to behave. We need a new institution on a economic level, on a new economic level. Some of us, a lot of us, are using collective enterprise as a means of affecting justice in place. Well, it's awesome to have 100,000 new community businesses owned by people who should be owning businesses, but what mechanism do we have to influence new consumer behavior to actually rock with these new things? It's one thing if you got all the businesses and they're all there and they're all spanking and beautiful, break-even points and analysis is popping. Yet, if everybody's still programmed to go to Whole Foods instead of the new co-op, then Whole Foods still gets the business. So we need an institution that connects these dots. And that's what mass media as an institution does. So that's what cultural institution building is for me, and how it connects with the other new institutions that are being built.
I'm going to answer it or speak to it this way, because I pretty much only know in practice, you know, what kind of how to answer these. So there's a school, my alma mater actually, that's near the place in which I'm working, which is Noble Elementary Middle School. And so I have, as you heard in my bio, I'm the director of the Burwood House, which is a community space that I developed where I'm working with community members. And I have meetings there. I've let other people come in and meet and hold workshops that we've done in the area. We've done murals and we've been taking care of the area in the neighborhood. And the school being one of those places. And so as you all know, the schools are, as Bryce talked about, they're broken, right? Public schools are broken, not really working well. I just found out yesterday that there's 52, 8th grade class has 52 students in the class. 52 8th graders in one class. And we know because of that, the students aren't really getting all that they need. But what's really important as far as the Burwood House and creating our own institutions is to provide hope for the students. And what I mean by that, if they are not getting what they can in the classroom, then they can maybe get it outside of the class through supplemental education, and what parents do anyway. Sometimes parents actually pay to have their students go to take on music classes or, you know, the extracurricular things. Well, a community house that's controlled by a person in the community who cares about it and cares about the students will make a big difference. because a lot of times people don't have the income to pay. They don't even have, people in the community don't, a lot of times don't have transportation. They don't have the money to get additional support. And so at the Burwood House, I'm providing some, for instance, some STEAM programs where the young people can come and learn about science, math, and art, and technology. Parents are meeting there. So what actually happens is that what's important is that community begins to understand that they can take control and have power. That they have power over their own lives, and they don't have to wait for a government, for the government. They don't have to wait for a corporation. They don't have to wait for anybody to take control of their lives. And it may seem, in some cases, kind of far-fetched because we're really used to depending on our public institutions as they are now, but we really need to start thinking deeper about how we're going to manage them when they don't work. And that's extremely important.
I'm going to build off what Kim said. Be the leader you've been looking for. Be the change you want to see. I mean, these are common phrases that you'll hear in like-minded organizations throughout the city of Detroit. The same year, I don't remember what year it was, former Secretary of State Arne Duncan coined Detroit as ground zero for education. When I heard that on the news, I had just participated in this dialogue at the CCNDC Community Center on Cass, not far from here, on environmental justice planned and facilitated by a 12-year-old boy. And then I see this on the news, like, yeah, I get it, because I was also working in a DPS school where my lead teacher told me to tie this 5-year-old to his cot if he wouldn't lay down during nap time with his own blanket. And I'm like, that's crazy. I'm not doing that. You know, but like my job was on the like. So anyway, institutions. Schools, my experience is they don't have the answer yet, right? What's the answer? How do you best educate our children? How do you best serve our youth for, to prepare them for the future? How do you do that? Like, we're working in these old models. We have this old system that is failing hundreds of thousands of our young people. So I remember going to a conversation, or it was a lecture by Jeffrey Canada, one of the most quote-unquote successful charter school developers. He has a school in New York City, has a lot of published work and sort of well-known. He said that he was at a conversation in Washington about education, and like no one had the answers, right? Like you expect, like, well, someone has the answer. I'm like, how do we fix the education problem, right? There's no answer. And so you just have to do it yourself. You just have to start your own institution, and you have to develop the relationships and network with people who have similar values and similar goals. If we think that education should provide young people with the skills to achieve ambitious goals and live lives of meaning, which is what the Ball School hopes to do or aims to do, then what does it need to look like? Schools should need to provide opportunities for young people to learn how to fix things, learn how to change bike tires, grow their own food, produce their own media, write their own stories, publish their own work, design their own ideas. Like, and that's not happening in schools. And so if it's not happening, then you have to be the leader that you've been looking for.
And I do want to add one thing. I always try to make a distinction when I'm sitting here between schooling and schools. I mean, education, let me say it again. Between schooling and education. 9 times out of 10, when we say the words education, most people's minds go directly to school. But education is everywhere, every place. It's not just in the schools, and I think that's one of the big shortcomings, is that we put our eggs all in schools and into the formal education institutions, and we really need to think about education as being much broader. And so, although I don't think I explained it really well the first time when I spoke, what I want to emphasize is that the bridge between public schools or even charter schools and education for all of our children and adults for that matter is really up to us, and we need to take control over that and never forget that education is everywhere.
So the question is why, right? The simple answer is that because there's a war being waged, and best believe that the common man, working man and woman, black, white, brown, yellow, purple, there's a war being waged. Now, zoom into Detroit, those people look like this panel. And there is a very intentional, very malicious war being waged on all fronts. And that is something that we must not glaze over. We must all look in the face and think about how our upbringing, how we were raised, how our thoughts, how our actions, how our inactions contribute, no matter what your background is, contribute to this war that's being waged. And I just want to punctuate that there is this war being waged, especially in Detroit, on so many levels, land, water. If you just look at the commons, there's a war being waged for each of those areas: education, access to capital, access to water, access to food, access to land, housing, community services. So that's the main thing that, to me, like, number one, there's a war being waged. And two is that it's important to create, to have community-owned institutions, community-controlled institutions, because it's very important for us to shift as a people, collectively, to shift from a lack-based mentality, as in people never do this, or those people don't do this, and no, and I have to, which shows up in I want to create something, but I haven't even done the research to see if it already exists. And in a way, what shows up is we begin to cannibalize the resources, each other. We begin competing when we didn't even assess the resources we have in our community, because a lot of times, subconsciously, we think that there are none, and that the Savior is going to come from somewhere outside of ourselves. And so that's the deeper why, shifting from lack to abundance, and mapping our communities, mapping the resources, mapping our families, what skills do we have. You know, you may down your brother all the time, but you may have skills that you don't have, and that's just what we're put here to do. We're social beings by nature. And so it's important one of the ways that this organically showed up in Detroit is I co-founded an organization called the Conscious Community Cooperative Think Tank. And the purpose is to promote programs, businesses, and initiatives for self-sufficiency and align them in a platform that we can hopefully at some point say, okay, this is going well. My people in Boston, we want you to, from Detroit, we want you to come and show us why that's working so well. We want you to show us what's going on with the Detroit Independent Freedom Schools, what's going on with Conscious Community Cooperative, what's going on with Detroit African Music Institution. How are these things being successful and how are they going so that we can replicate these things and model these things. Well, we need to be rooted enough where we can say, let's map our communities. And I think that's what, I know we're talking about creating institutions, but first, before you create something, research what you have. Research what you have around you right now. And that's what being involved in the Detroit Summer allowed me to do, and allowed me to say, I don't have to create all this stuff. I never could, obviously. But I was able to see, there's already work happening, how can I connect? And then as there's a gaps that show up, we can then strategize collectively to meet the need. And creating institutions intentionally to meet needs. And that's the why.
Well said.
So, quick, one, looking at the definition, my own definition of institution. So, an institution for me is a container for a particular area of human activity. This container looks like an intentional aggregation of systems designed to work together, integrated systems. And the function of these integrated systems produce a particular area of human activity under a particular ethic. So the institutions, the areas of human activity that have existed based on how Western society has been formed. We have law, we have economics, we have education, we have war, we do have entertainment. Just those 5 as examples though. The last 2,000 years or so, each one of these areas, and there are more areas of activity, each one of these areas of human activity were these containers that were built were for a particular type of consciousness, a particular politic to guide a particular type of activity to happen on Earth. It's the politic of these aggregated systems. And what were they actualizing? So we just want to be real clear. We have Indo-European culture that has existed in real life for the last 2,500 years. And it has decided to organize itself in a particular way where we have these different areas of activity and aggregated systems to actualize certain effects based on a particular politic. In real life, the politic was against people of any type of melanin. So, this is a question facing you that you can ask yourself. If we have, for the past couple thousand years, these institutions which were designed under a particular type of racial politic to act on the world in a particular type of way, and in real life, there is an intention for these institutions to affect people's lives, particular ethnic groups in specific ways. If this is really the case, which it is, then we ask ourselves, what is the need for new institutions? Like for real, if that's really the case, is this shit cool? Is it something where it's like, yeah, that's how it started, and 2,500, almost 3,000 years later, it's still doing the same thing, regardless to how much activism and reform. We can ask ourselves 3,000 years later, like, do we need something new, or should we still try to fuck with this thing and see if it can do something different? So this is not a rhetorical question that just people in a unique circumstance are answering. Like, this is something for everybody.
I have a bridge question, which is question number, one of the questions that I sent out, I just preface it with a little story that Bryce's comment reminded me of. I have actually one of your coworkers, Pete, our homegirl Brittany. She tells the story of a Native American woman who went to university, actually, University of Michigan, which many of y'all might be familiar with. And she said she was in the School of Natural Resources, and it just hit her one day that I don't know if she said some or many, you'd have to ask her, but I'll just say some to be generous. Some of her classmates, she realized that professionally and maybe even personally, she was going to have to, if she was going to do what she wanted to do in the world and in the community, she was going to be opposed to these people that she was sitting in the classroom with right then and there. Like it was like an epiphany that came to her, one day sitting in the class with her classmates at the School of Natural Resources. And so the question that I asked, we're not trying to pit our panelists against each other, but we're trying to offer, some things to the semester in Detroit, to the University of Michigan, to our audiences. What are some healthy or constructive roles that universities can play in your work? Whether that's students, whether that's professors, whether that's departments. What are some healthy or constructive? As Bryce said, we can have a sense of what these institutions can do, to decimate our communities. But what are some healthy and constructive ways that universities can or have plug in? And if you don't have any, then maybe talk about that.
It's not going to be long, teacher. So, 2 examples. We're experiencing one right now. So the University of Michigan, you all are here. They brought in the conversations into our community and have really tried to be observant, respectful, opening up this broad classroom. So I would say that this is one example of how a university could be positive or proactive and a benefit to community. And also I know that it's been collaboration where people have been trying to listen. The other experience that I've had in another university, close your ears, but Eastern Michigan University with Semis have been doing some tremendous work also as far as coming into community, listening, being respectful, trying to find out from community members what they want, providing resources for teachers as well as community members to build skill set, bringing resources to them and not extracting. So just those 2 examples just immediately come to mind.
At the James and Gracie Boggs School, we work with college-age students in different ways. There's internships. There are folks from the School of Social Work, School of Education, Semester in Detroit, that come to the school and work directly and indirectly with students. This is helpful because, just like more hands on deck is helpful in school situations when you've got putting out fires all the time and many crises. But also because there are often like paradigm shifts with the young people or college age students that we work with. I I thought that schools were this way, but now I can see that they are this way. Or my experience was X, but I see that there are alternate experiences. And so I often see attitude shifts, belief shifts, paradigm shifts with young people that are growing into their adulthood, and really, especially if they're interested in education and how educational systems work, where they're thinking more deeply about things when they're actually like hands on the ground. And also, I think that that the Bog School is doing something unique in the city of Detroit. And I think how we're rooted, our values, our practices, our network, how we engage with families, I think that's different from other schools. I know that's different from other schools. And I think it would be beneficial also for folks who are students, participants, teachers, to go into universities and share the experiences on their side. And so I would like to see like reciprocal experiences between staff, parents, teachers, students, learners, so that more people are having conversations around reimagining education and the purpose of education. Why do we send our kids to school? What do schools need to look like in order for our children to be successful?
Well, the way we'll ask a question, it personified universities, like corporate personhood style. So my initial response to that is universities in and of themselves, they're not doing anything good in a very real way. There are people in these universities. What Craig has had to go through for the past however many years the semester in Detroit has been happening, he can tell you how much fighting he's had to do just to get you all in Detroit. A university that started in Detroit and has been vehemently opposed to white students coming to Detroit for decades because of all of the narratives, the negative narratives that are projected in mainstream media. So in a very global way, my experience with universities at large is that universities at large are these very formalized colonial institutions, yet there are people inside of them that choose to move based on their heart, and then I'm experiencing people struggle. And it's more and more people who struggle over time that can affect a department at a time. So I've interacted with a couple folks from like the social work department, what's it, for U of M? Social work department. So it's like, boom, okay, it's more of y'all. I'm interacting with people in stamps. I'll shout out my partner, Anya. Have been working with a professor in the School of Architecture who's now running this high school architecture program right up the street. But just the past 3 years, how much fighting Anya had to do to get U of M, who was the fiduciary of a grant, to pay people in the hood. Like, oh no, we're not going to pay checks to people in that neighborhood. I'm just talking about all kind of racism. So yeah, and that's an institutional policy. That wasn't like someone like, I'm making a personal decision to say no and no to these black people. I'm going, according to the policy, is what people she kept fighting with. So we just have to be real that it is individuals who are choosing to do something different that are changing the way that institutions can function. But in real life, institutions in and of themselves, they're not actualizing any good. They're the people. So we're not going to give U of M credit. I'm going to give Craig credit for today. Just on that.
Well. You're very generous. So I'm grateful for the question, which is what is the role the original question was, what is the role of universities? And I look at that so many different ways. Thank you, Bryce, for saying those things. So I'm gonna give a couple plugs out of the way, like my good experiences that I've had, to kind of balance it a little bit. So my experience with universities, period, has been pretty. I've just begun recovering from my experience in university because I went in not knowing what it was. I went in thinking that it was something that was literally going to elevate me to make me this person where I could just have access to immediate jobs and be able to choose and go wherever I wanted to go and do all these things. This is the story that was sold to us. At least let me speak for myself. This was sold to me. Like, education is your only route to success. Nothing else. That, prison, death. Choose. Not really a choice. So, that said, I've just been coming out 5 years out of college, just have been able to heal. When I went to a black institution, you know, private as it was, it's still a black institution, and I'm still healing from what I thought it was and just accepting it for what it is. And I put a lot of pressure on the actual institution when realizing that this is a part of a system. Educational complex, the education industry is a system designed to, system C, efficiency, numbers, simple, So anyway, all that's the context. And coming back to Detroit, I had a couple of positive experiences with U of M by way of the law clinic, working with Alicia Alvarez and offering so much, she offers so much support in the line of cooperative law advice, coming from dispatching her students to work on cooperative projects that we had, legal advice, and all these things that were just invaluable. We didn't know where else to get at that time. She was representing the university, so we were really appreciative to have that kind of partner. So it's like a double-edged sword when you critique. Another example is in my current position. I work at EcoWorks. I'm a water activist and program coordinator for a water program, and we presented to the U of M SNRE. I'm not going to try to butcher what that represents, but y'all know what that is. Natural science and environment, something. We presented at I won't say a contest, but it was basically deciding whether you would want to intern or work on our water project, or water affordability project. And the students chose to work on water affordability in Detroit. And this was my first experience with actual people that weren't from the community and actually got it. They actually usually when you see, just being honest, usually when you see a bunch of white people from the University of Michigan or any other university, like, oh man, they think they know what's going on, and they're just like, it's not. And it's a lot of things going on, and it's a lot of things that you just don't know. You don't know that you don't know, and it just shows up in weird ways. So anyway, it's been a really good, positive experience working with this team. They have some experience already, and so it's just been that was a positive experience to kind of shift my negative experience of universities. Now, the real, so much more can be being done. I think as far as what the role that institutions play, just like if you take a school, when you close a school, you really shut down a part of the community, and that's been a part of the war that's being waged in Detroit intentionally, and you don't have to ask who's been impacted by that. So when you think about the power that an institution has, Wayne State, University of Michigan, I'm just going to keep it real. Like, who are let's take it to the economics. So who is this institution really committed to? And that's the question. That's like the guiding question for all of this. Who is it committed to? And what are the intentional partnerships that are being created? Do we not, all educational institutions need cleaning services, need accounting services, need all these very, very basic things? Who are they contracting to do these things? Do you care? Does it matter? Do you see the impact? So that's kind of where my mind goes. I think there's a deeper level of community involvement that we're kind of getting to this kind of surface level, and I guess that's maybe a good place to start. We got to start somewhere, but we have to keep pushing the envelope and keep putting pressure. And you all are in that position where you can ask these questions and be some of those people that Bryce was talking about, to influence the teachers, to influence the people that are there. And so, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot, but that's an example. I think back to follow the money. And if somebody says, an institution says that they're about a certain thing, and you look at the receipts and they tell a different story, to me, that's where the work moving forward can be done. And one example.
Just one more little note. As it relates to leveraging universities as big balls of resources, big worlds of resources, that is one of the constructive values of having partnerships with people who are part of universities. For instance, with the construction of our mothership, which is a cultural marker produced by the 1 Mile Project. Because one of the partners on the 1 Mile Project, Anya, was a professor at Tottenham School of Architecture, then she was able to she had a conversation with her department head, with her boss, and because her boss was more on the progressive side, then she allowed Anya this opportunity to do this project in Detroit and use her students, use her grad students as interns. So Anya still had to make a case though. We had access to the digital fabrication lab. U of M ended up charging us for it, in addition to the fiduciary fee. But I guess that's like us leveraging, because they could have just been flat out no on a very real tip, because the students who were using the machines to build the mothership was not a school project. It just so happened that Anya was finagled so they could get school credit. So people can think creatively with sincerity on how to leverage those assets and bring those assets in the form of human resource, in the form of the actual equipment to be used in community scenarios. Just know that that is a work, that's an intention. You gotta be super intentional, okay, I want to transfer wealth and resources in the form of people and equipment to this scenario. This institution is already against that. So it's a work. It's a work. I just wanted to highlight that though. It is a lot of positive potential, but the actual value for the depth of collaborations that we're investigating right now, that value doesn't exist yet. So you all are the ones who continue to make the case for that.
Really quickly, I completely forgot this. And so in the land of hope, right, we have to remain positive and hopeful. One of the things that I'm excited to do as a representative of our think tank is to develop an educational series and then be able to take that on the road. And universities are a great place to be able to do that. But it's important that that kind of ties into a whole other world of, variables is that something that they're going to allow? Why won't they allow that? Is that something, are you intentionally making spaces for those who don't really have a voice in your university? And do you see that as a part of the work that you can do collectively? And so I just wanted to throw it out there, but that's something that I'm hopeful for. We can definitely start with the HBCU circuit, but I would hope that it evolve into broadening that into other universities as well. So that I just wanted to add that glimmer of hope.
We'll take that glimmer of hope and ask you to keep going with it. In terms of your work, in terms of what you see and the institutions that you're building and that you're moving with, what are the opportunities that you see?
Exciting. So, I talked about the think tank, Conscious Community Cooperative think tank, and one of the main things that we've done is continue to ask the question of what is community, because it's a word that we throw out a lot, and everyone has a different response. And community can mean everything from a place where you live to a code word for Black people. So it just kind of varies. What I'm excited about is that we began mapping, doing asset mapping of the community, and like I said, shifting from lack to abundance thinking. So what are the resources, what are the organizations, what are the people that are operating in these areas of activity? And just to list those, economics, culture, health, media, education, entertainment, and culture, community safety and defense, technology and energy, law, politics, spirituality. So what are the institutions? So we began mapping because we didn't want to start saying we needed to create all these institutions before we actually said what actually exists in Detroit. And what we found out was that there are institutions that exist in these various areas, and what organically came out of working through the think tank is practicing that. So we realized that there was a gap as it relates to emergency preparedness, and there is a gap as it relates to having our stories told, self-determination, having our story told in a way that represents us well, not this whitewashed way of we talk about Detroit, but who can we turn to get this story? We didn't come up with anything. So a group of us came together, we had a retreat, and we decided we're going to create a news station. We're going to create a platform, and we call it Radio, and produced about 1.5 years worth of content on a weekly basis of self-sufficiency. People work around the city doing projects on self-sufficiency, business owners, local youth, whatever, that relates to emergency preparedness and self-sufficiency. That was something that came out organic. And because we mapped out and we said, okay, this is a need. This is something that's really important. Another example, I'm sure somebody's going to talk about it, but I'll just say Detroit Independent Freedom Schools. So that's something that is meeting a need. And it's pretty obvious that that's something that's a need in Detroit, an alternative to schooling. And we basically mapped out a lot of these areas, and then what came up from that is, okay, now we know what institutions we have, and let's work with them. Now we know what institutions we don't have, but we need support in being able to develop them. So putting on another hat with another group of people, we decided, okay, we have the skill set to actually do some of this development, to actually support the businesses and entities and organizations that want to form and create. So the cooperation group formed to meet that need. And I don't know if you're familiar with Solidarity. It's one of our first projects that we helped get off the ground. They're doing solar streetlights in Highland Park, where all the streetlights have been, the residential streetlights have been taken out. And now they are not working with other partners that are also Black-led institutions, Black members, Black engineers that are doing the solar streetlights. So our ecosystem is being strengthened, and we're intentionally working working within what we met. And when we realized that, okay, now we have the support, but we don't have the access to the capital. Some of these businesses, okay, they have a business plan, but actually the way our economy, I don't know if y'all noticed, but the way our economy is set up, access to capital has been removed from the commons. You know, that has been one of the, whether it's in housing, whether it's in personal financing, et cetera, that's something that was in need that we needed to meet. So with myself, Jackson Hotel, Margot, the lab who's back there, and Bryce, we developed a structure we worked on to meet that need and to be able to offer patient capital to community groups that wanted to have collective ownership. And so, saying all this to say, we're being very intentional about the institutions that we're creating and having them now, engineering them so that they work together and that they're part of, they're pieces of a puzzle that come together to make a whole picture. And so I think that was the main thing that I want to say. If we do end up doing breakouts, I have like some handouts. There's a really great article that Marco Delau did about cooperation and co-ops, and I'm really a big proponent and advocate for community ownership through the cooperative model. And these things that we've mapped out, these entities, we're envisioning how they can be community cooperatively owned, and that's a very important component that I just want to leave everybody with. Thank you.
Opportunities. At the Bog School, we have opportunities to influence and learn with and struggle with young people every day. Two things are coming to mind when I think about opportunities. 2 years ago, mom brings son to school, says, I don't know if my son's going to eat the school food because my son only eats bacon and chicken. We said, okay, thanks for sharing that with us. It's good to know. And through our Farm to School program at the Bog School, where students partner with local farmers, local growers to cook for their classmates, this student made hummus for the first time. And he loved it.
Nice.
And he brought it home to his family, and he taught his mom how to make hummus. When I think about opportunity, I think about this boy and his mom making hummus at home on a Saturday. Like the same kid that would only eat bacon and chicken. When I think about opportunity, I think about taking neighborhood walks with our students, who we call solutionaries. No, we can figure out how to solve this problem. We have the skill set amongst our school community, our families, to be able to solve problems. And so a group of third graders was walking around the neighborhood, and they were like, why are there so many tires in these abandoned lots? Like, I see tires everywhere. Are people just dumping tires, or how did the tires get here? How long have the tires been here? Right, all of these questions the third graders want answers to. And the teacher couldn't explain it because she didn't really know how the tires got there, how long they had got there, or why people were dumping tires in this lot. So it became a community investigation where students wanted to learn more, so they were asking neighbors, and eventually, after about a month, the class decided that they were going to roll the tires back to the Bog School and wash them and build obstacle courses. And that's a solution. And I have like millions of examples on how our students are solutionaries and how there are opportunities every day for us to think together and for us to solve problems. And I mean, it's like my favorite thing about working at the school. There's all, like, working with young people, they're brilliant, and there are opportunities like every moment of the day working with children.
I wanted to say ditto. No, so it's always opportunities to learn and to grow, not even giving specific stories, but really ditto. Ditto is always opportunities to learn and grow.
What was the question? Opportunity.
Opportunities related to your work related to
Oh. For those of y'all who would love to bring some graphic design skills to a community scenario, there are opportunities for that. Just talk to me later. So I guess on a meta level, one of the greatest opportunities that exists for outsiders who are interested in benefiting a neighborhood scenario, a Detroit neighborhood scenario, then the first opportunity that's available is an opportunity for self-literacy, to come in contact with exactly how many social conditions are you operating from in your own life, not just as it relates to how you project on other people, but like how many status quo, how much Kool-Aid have you actually drank? Like, it's a real opportunity to come in contact with that. Because first and foremost, in order to begin the work with any degree of integrity, you must approach anybody that you meet in that neighborhood as the highest expert based on their lived experience. They know to the most nuanced degree. They have the wisdom and understanding of that environment like no one else. I'm interacting with people right now who their biggest challenge is accepting Black leadership. They never in their life had to orient, especially a Black man who calls himself an African, like I'm an African man, blah, blah, blah. They've never come face to face with that kind of personality saying, I am leadership, I am expertise, I know what I want here. Most that you can all do is offer ideas to help actualize. But we're not bringing in people to help us imagine the possibilities of this place. We're bringing in people to help us imagine different ways to actualize this thing. Some people just can't take that shit. They just really can't, you know what I mean? So like, that's the first opportunity, is to really learn all the things that block from self-transformation and all the things that will block from being able to support someone authentically if that's really what you want to do.
Yes. That sparked a thought. I'll just say it. Thank you for making this relevant to students. Thank you. So on that note, one of the things that I've also been part of doing as a part of different organizations, but just being myself really, is offering perspectives and resources for just navigating how to be present in community, how to be present as a white person in community. How do you deal and resolve the contradictions that are ever present? How do you deal with the privilege? How do you deal with just the perception of you just being in that space? And that we curated a group, a collection of resources that I term the Liberation Library. And it just has a lot of context about race, privilege, the origins, referencing a lot of organizations that are national, and that are some of these that are co-ops, that Aorta, which is a co-op that basically teaches about and teaches how to facilitate. How do you show up in community? How do you conduct a meeting? How do you practice nonviolent communication? And all of these things are important, are essential, and the things that we don't talk about when we talk about creating new things or projects or working with people to complete an assignment. Those communication skills that are like, it's kind of like when you get to college, you're supposed to have them, but where are we learning them? It's just kind of just like, hey, you missed, communications 100 through 300, but you're just going to jump into advanced communications and on a collegiate level, and I'm sure it'll work out right. It's ridiculous. And so we all need it. And these are things that Black and brown people need to be reminded of as well, how to support people in their process. And, white people have to realize that not everybody's going to support you in your process. And that's not everybody's role to kind of coach you through white fragility or coach you through dealing with your privilege. Not everybody's in a space to even do that. But there are people that have gone through enough and have experienced enough to be able to support that. And just knowing that that is work that is ongoing, and to just trust the process. I think it's really important in creating and building institutions, and just not even institutions, but just we think of an institution very loosely as a group of people working together, and how to be in community. And so that's a resource that I've done for EcoWorks, I've done for Solidarity, I've done for the Cooperation Group. So I just kind of adapt it and take it wherever. But it's none of the information that I create, I just curate it. And so that's a resource that I can offer to anybody that's interested in just checking out some of that information. Some of it's workbooks, some of it's videos, some of it's funny stuff, some of it's kind of deep, but I'm going to offer that as it relates to being prepared to create institutions.
I just passed the mic quickly, like fiddle, right? In my short, non-descriptive answer, but statements. As we think about institutions, and I started off saying that we are the institutions, or the institutions start inside of us. We really do have an opportunity to be institutions of love, empathy, and compassion. And those words, a lot of times, they sound very light and meaningless, but behind those words is a lot. When you don't like something, or something goes wrong, compassion and empathy needs to show up. Right? And there's something inside your spirit, inside your inner being that you really have to deal with. When things are not just, it's easy to be flip and not love. Those words are really used very, very lightly. So, as we're building institutions, I'm going to say for all humanity, no matter what the color, there is a certain spirit that we need to have in order for this stuff to change. Whether it's when you're dealing with economics and you don't get it. And so I'm putting out the challenge for everybody that's here to really try to be different, to really try to love, to try to be compassionate, and to try to, be empathetic towards one another. And I'll tell you one quick story. A person I'm gonna tell you a quick story. It's a gentleman by the name of Nelson Johnson. Nelson Johnson. And Nelson Johnson had to, he was part of the Greensboro massacre. Is anybody familiar with that massacre? I don't know, but Nelson, he fought a lot with the Ku Klux Klan in Greensboro. And during this time, his friends got murdered. You know, they were having, and it was a mixed group. I think it was 5 people that got murdered. You might know the exact numbers, but I'm not really the historian. But Nelson and his wife, Joyce Johnson, they have had to deal with loving and being compassionate and being empathetic to the Ku Klux Klan over the years. And it's been a long process. And they had to grow into that love, and they had to grow into that compassion. So again, I say to you, as we are building and we have these hurts, we have these biases, we really need to think deeply how we're going to do our shifting. It's much easier said than done, but a lot of it has to do with the spirit that we have within us.
Thanks, Kim. I want to echo the love. I want to echo the love part that she talked about, and I kind of want to say 2 things. You know, Bryce and I have worked together in different ways. I think maybe surfacely, how deep we've gotten, but I know that I have been intentional about expressing my love and my gratitude to him. Because I see him, I see the work that he does. I see who he impacts. I hear stories about Bryce's work. And it's important to continue to express gratitude, or to begin expressing gratitude and expressing love. When we talk about solutions, you know, we have a 7th grade student that just lost his brother a couple months ago. His brother was shot, family, you know, had moved to a different location. Grandmother's struggling, you know, it's challenging for this family. You know, it's challenging for his younger sister and for siblings. Father's in prison. You know, it's this boy comes to the office sometimes when he just needs to cry, or when he just wants to talk about his brother David. I have the opportunity to tell him every day that I love him, and I make sure that I do that. You know, but I make sure that I mean it. When you have institutions that are rooted in good practices and that are that have the best interest of people at heart, then they will be successful. And the other part of that is really expressing that and making that love, making that empathy, that collaboration visible. Because then other people say, oh, you know, what are they doing over on 1 Mile? Or what does Allied Media Projects do? You feel it. You know, you feel it, you see it, you hear it, and you start to become it and live it, and it becomes your lifestyle. You know, and that's the way things happen. And love is at the nucleus of all of that.
So to create a little echo chamber, on the love piece, from my perspective, from an African perspective, there are real systems and institutions that are dedicated to the cultivation of human virtues. We are at a time right now where a lot of people are recognizing that systems that are designed to actually produce some of the attributes that Kim just named, like empathy, compassion, transparency, openness, receptivity. Those systems are vital to the new that so many of us are collectively visioning together. So when we're talking about institutions, yes, a lot of the 2 hours has been spent talking about these quote-unquote more earth-based, aggregators of systems that do things on earth like affect policy, create policy, or build buildings, or create fiat currency that's transacted. The first systems that make all that stuff possible are the systems that actually cultivate the emotions, the systems that cultivate personalities, identities, and attributes. That is some of the most important work that's happening right now, is us building these formal structures that we can rely on, that from these structures will produce this material substance, this concrete, which is the fabric, the interstitial tissues of our relationships. And it's upon that, those systems, healthy systems, that you can build whole new universes. So this love shit is not just some talk. These aren't just words. This is a real energetic infrastructure that is being built that will sustain the identities and behaviors that will create that.
And I hear you say wage love.
Wage love.
Say wage love.
Wage love.
Wage love.
Wage love.
At this point, we're going to take the last 15 minutes and get y'all in more and closer conversation with our groups. One of the things that I'm taking away from this is the mission to create what might not have been there for us. You know, we might not have had a place in 7th grade where we can go cry. We might not have had a certain type of person to look out for us, or a house in our neighborhood where we could go at a certain moment. You know, we might not have had this interstitial tissue, or, you know, we might just been encouraged to go to college and get a job. We weren't encouraged to do X, Y, and Z. You know, so it's a process of creating what was not yet given for us, but this is a process of creating the new. And so we're going to have 4 different conversations with Marisol, come right here on this wall right here. With Bryce, come right here on that wall right there. With Kim, go to that far wall right there where the co-recs are. And B. Anthony on this side right here where the video camera is at. We're going to take the last about 12 minutes for just a small group conversation for you to reflect on what you've heard, reflect on what it's made you think and feel, reflect on if there are any questions that have come up. Again, Mighty Soul section is right here. Bryce's section is right here near the water cooler. Kim's section is right here in the back on the coat rack. And B. Anthony's section is right here for the last 10, 11 minutes of our day.
Yes.